Let's get cracking with what I was going to cover today. So just to give you a little bit of background, this is a topic that I've been doing quite a lot of research on and had quite a lot of interest in for a number of years now. In terms of myself, it's never been a strong point of mine, being able to influence people, or even the social aspect of some of the roles I've done over the past few years have always been a stretch for me. And so I felt that this was one development goal that I really needed to work on, and have been doing so for the last sort of maybe 4 or 5 years, building up my tools and different ways of communicating and different ways of working, to a point where I've got a few things that I use on a regular basis, and I'm always trying to add to that. A couple of things I'm going to share with you today. Some of them may be fairly common knowledge, or you may have heard of them before, or you may already use them, but hopefully there'll be something in there that you could perhaps take away. What we're going to cover today, I'm going to briefly look at how we can help to get people on board. So the second point is around this idea of a win-win outcome. And I'd like to start by talking about that really in terms of a realization that I had a few years ago. I read a book by Stephen Covey, which some of you may have heard of or even read, called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of Stephen Covey's 7 habits is win-win. And up until that point, it had never really occurred to me that we could come to a solution or come to an end result that would be of benefit for both of us, really. And that was a massive turning point for me in terms of seeing things slightly differently. So now when we're talking about conversations and thinking about a win-win outcome, it's less about how do I get my point across and how do I win this and get what I want from it. And it's more about how can we both get as much as we want and get the ideal outcome for the two parties. So we'll be talking a little bit about what that looks like and what that means within this session. I just wanted to share this quote. It's from a chap called Steve Martin, not the actor, but an author and practitioner around influence. So he learned from and has written books with another guy called Robert Cialdini, quite a big name within the world of influence. He wrote a book called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. It's quite a chunky book, as you can see. But basically, this is the go-to really around how we can use influence to come to the end result that we are looking for. And I'll share with you his universal set of principles that he came up with in a minute. But what Steve Martin says is that, contrary to popular belief, there are not people who are just great persuaders because they're born that way, or great influencers because they're born that way. Yes, there are some people who find it more natural and who maybe find it a little bit easier. It's more in with their preferences and their ways of thinking and their ways of working. But actually, it's a set of skills, not a set of qualities, that help people to influence and persuade others. And so if we can tap into those universal principles, and if we can learn to use them authentically for ourselves and apply them in the relationships that we have and in the conversations that we have, we can also learn to influence and persuade, which I think is great news for those of us like myself who really aren't naturally geared towards being very bubbly, being very social, being very more of a pull. I used to try to influence people with more of a push, so trying to push people towards what I thought was right, whereas actually learning the skills has allowed me to be more of the type of person who can encourage and pull somebody towards what I'm hoping to achieve. So, Robert Cialdini's 7 principles. I think some of these are really straightforward and make an awful lot of sense. And not all of them will sit with you. Not all of them will be relevant to you. Some of them you may think, oh, that's not going to work in my environment, or that doesn't suit my personality. And that's absolutely fine. I think for me, it was finding a couple of these that I could use on a day-to-day basis that would allow me to increase my ability to influence others. So I'll start at the top. Reciprocity, the idea that if we give something away, then that will be reciprocated. So there's some interesting research out there around reciprocation, and Steve Martin, who we just saw the quote from, did a great webinar for, I think it was Harvard Business Review, around the 7 principles, and he talks about some of this research. I definitely recommend it and can share the link for that. But he talks about a couple of studies that were done around this. And one that stuck out for me was a group of GPs were asked to contribute to a survey about the work that they were doing. And initially, the company who was undertaking the survey sent a letter or an email to these GPs and said, we'd love for you to get involved. And if you get involved and complete our survey, we will send you £20. And they had a very small uptake. Very few people got involved. On the next round, instead of sending that email, they sent a letter with £20 and said, here's a gift from us. We'd really love it if you completed our survey. And their survey responses went from being down in the 10s up into the 60% response rate, which is a massive increase in terms of how much they got back from that one change. And that is we're led to believe that's due to that reciprocity. So we have received something, therefore we feel a sense of having to give something back. Now, obviously, as with all of these 7, this is not about necessarily manipulation. It's really about thinking how you can do this in an authentic way and in a way that can help you to build relationships, not damage relationships. So that's really important. We're not looking at manipulatively doing something for someone else so that they have to do something back. What we're doing is we're building a relationship with them. So we're doing something for them in order for us to build that, and it links in with some of the others that we're going to look at in a moment, but so that we build up that relationship and so that they feel like they want to give a little. They're willing to let go of something in order, be that their time, be that their money, be that their knowledge and experience. They're willing to give that up because we have met them part way, or we have taken the initiative and given something back. The second one is liking. That goes without saying, doesn't it? We generally tend to want to do more for people if we like them, if we think they're our kind of people, if we think that we get on with them, if we've got a good rapport with them, if maybe we've worked well with them in the past, we're more likely to say yes to something than if perhaps we don't trust them, or if we perhaps can't see our values being aligned, then we're less likely. And so the second principle is around, again, creating that relationship, creating a common ground, creating something where it's a conversation and you are both on the same level and where that other person can connect with you. The third one is social proof. So this is quite an interesting one. So this is one that doesn't particularly influence me as an individual, but we can definitely see where it influences a lot of people. Social proof is around seeing other people involved in something or getting on board with something, telling us that's a good idea, telling us that it's something that we want to be involved in. A really good recent example of that, which some of you may or may not be aware of, is the recent Prime drink, if any of you have come into contact with that. So a group of influencers were talking about and advertising this drink, which by all accounts seems to be not particularly nice tasting, but because it was something that people were getting involved in and that their peers were interested in, or the influencers were interested in, there was an absolute scrabble for getting hold of this drink. Any big trend or fad could also be explained via this social proof principle. So it's this idea that if other people are doing it, then it must be good. So used in sales quite often in terms of X amount of people are already on board with this, that tells us that it's really popular. So if it's something that's popular, then for some people that could be a very strong way to influence their involvement. The fourth principle is authority. So that is around an expertise or knowledge or experience being behind whatever the thing is that you're talking about. So if you're trying to influence somebody to get involved in a particular project, having somebody with a sense of authority or gravitas or expertise on board could potentially make them more likely to want to join in. So if you have this expert author, or this person coming along to do a talk, or this other person's involved and they're really engaged in it, and we know that this person knows a lot about that particular topic, then we're more likely to think, that's interesting. If they're interested in it, then I really should be. One of the interesting points that Steve Martin brought up about this one is that there's research out there to suggest that we are much more likely to take doctors or medical professionals' advice if they are wearing a stethoscope, which it's a very subconscious message to our brains that this person is a professional, that they have the qualifications and knowledge and experience that they need to give us that advice. And so we take that advice on board more. The same thing around displaying diplomas. So if you walk into a holistic therapist, or if you walk into a counsellor's office, having their certificates up on the wall give us a sense that they are an expert, they know what they're talking about, and we're more likely to be influenced by what they say to us. The next one is scarcity. There's not much of this, and we want you to be involved, and you think there's not much of it, so I really should be involved before it's all gone. So quite a lot of sort of TikTok and Instagram influencers might use this technique, or other online sales. When you see a conference, only 5 spaces left at this price, that sort of approach can be quite influential, can make us feel like if we don't get involved, then we are missing out. The next one is commitment and consistency. So commitment and consistency are around, if we say we are going to do something, so if we can get people to verbally tell us that they're going to be involved with something or commit to something in our discussion, then they are much more likely to follow through and to take part. And also consistency is around how consistent is it with their usual way of working, or their usual value set, or how they usually conduct themselves as an individual. So when we're having conversations with people around something that we want to influence on, getting them to say, I'll get involved at this time, or getting them to really think about how it fits in with their values or the way that they work or their principles, can have a big influence there. And then the last one is unity. Helping them to feel part of something, helping them to see the bigger picture and their place within the bigger picture. And this is a big one, I think, particularly if you're working in the public or third sector, because actually it's quite often around being part of something bigger, making a difference to individuals. So really tapping into what is it about what you're asking them to be involved with can fit into that idea of belonging, that feeling of I'm part of something special, I am part of a group, I'm making a difference on this level. So that's Cialdini's 7 principles of influence. As I mentioned at the beginning, not everyone will be influenced by all 7. So for me, social proof actually turns me off. I actively go against fads. I refused to read Harry Potter or watch any of the films when that was big and all my friends were watching it. But for me, unity and reciprocation are 2 massive ones. So if somebody does something for me, I feel almost compelled to do something in return. So it's about thinking what works for us and what may work with the people that we're trying to influence. It's not about manipulation. It's about adapting my communication so that I really try to tap into how that opportunity is going to be the most usefully communicated to the other person. So I'd like you to just take a moment before I move on and just try to think about something that maybe you need to influence someone else on at the moment. If you know that other person that you're trying to influence, maybe which one of these 7 might be the most useful to you. And do you understand what you could do for that person, or how you could communicate with that person in order to use that principle of influence in this situation. So, for example, you might say, authority is the most important with that individual. How are you going to bring some levels of authority to that conversation? Who could you refer to, or do you already have that knowledge and expertise that they can rely on and respect when you come into that conversation? If it's reciprocity, what are you willing to give? What are they looking for from this conversation that would show that you are willing to compromise and that you are willing to give? What would that look like? So you might want to carry on mulling over that. Building on from that, there's a couple of really quick ways that we can also look at influence, and it is around, for me, it's about creating that partnership. As you can see from this quote here, the mutual benefit that we can find. So I think of, when I'm having a conversation, where's their point? Where's their trajectory, or what is their end result? And where's mine? And how far away are they from each other? Trying to think about, are we worlds apart, or are we already fairly close? And then it's about thinking, how can I bring those closer together? How can I bring what they're looking for and what I'm looking for as close together as possible? What needs to shift and change? What do I need from them, and what do they need from me? So it's really looking at it from a cooperative, collaborative partnership point of view, rather than I need this and therefore they're going to have to concede and give it to me. And there's a couple of questions that I found really useful. So this comes from a book which I think is one of the best books I've read on influence, which is called Influence is Your Superpower by Zoe Chance. I thoroughly recommend it. It's nice and easy to read. It's also got some great information in there around the neuroscience around influence, and so much more than I could share with you in this short session. But I'm going to share two things. One is these 3 questions. 3, what she calls value creation questions, which can help us to see how we could bring those two sides of the story together, make them more aligned. So the first one is, how could this situation, whatever it is that's happening, how could this be even better for me? What can I get out of this partnership? What can I get out of this conversation? How can I use this to get an even better result for myself? Then the second question, how could it be even better for them? So what do they want to get out of it? And how could I enhance that and bring it together with my own needs in order to make the best for both? And then finally, identifying who else could benefit either directly or non-directly from whatever it is I'm trying to influence the other person on. So influence, just as a common example, influence your line manager around a promotion or maybe a pay rise. You'd think about what that could do for you. You'd think about what it could mean for them in terms of maybe you could take on extra responsibilities, or maybe it would help you with your motivation. And who else could benefit? So maybe the team could benefit from you having more responsibility, which would mean that you would be more available to them to share your knowledge and experience. So you think about those 3 questions, and if you don't know the answer to those 3 questions, then there's nothing wrong with having that as part of the conversation, I've found. So I've used this in conversations with my own line manager, in terms of, if I were to amend my role, this is what I think could be even better for me. But how could me amending my role support you even more? And actually outright asking them the question, starting that conversation to show that I'm willing to just look at their side of things, not just my own. And then who else could benefit? And then the other thing from the Zoe Chance book that I'd like to share with you is, once we know the answer to those questions and we want to have that conversation, is how we frame the conversation, how we plan what we're going to say, and how we build our case. And now there are lots of frames that we can use, but these are 3 that she mentions that are particularly useful, and I've personally found probably the first two the most useful. I haven't really had cause to use the mysterious yet, but definitely I use the monumental and the manageable on a very regular basis. So for me, monumental is around that, going back to that being part of something, the unity and also the authority and the liking as well that we talked about a little earlier on. It's around saying, hey, I've got this big idea. Look at how great this is going to be. This is going to help to fulfill our purpose. We've got this big vision, and I can link into that big vision. So it helps people to see themselves as being part of something important, part of something different, exciting, new, innovative, creative. The idea that we need to be involved because it's going to be great. So monumental is really helpful if maybe you're setting up a new service or starting a new piece of work that you want other people to come on board with. You're putting into practice a new learning and development opportunity, or a new program of some description, or you're starting off on a new partnership with another organization. It's about saying, look at what we can achieve. This is the big idea. And it's speaking to their values, speaking to what they think is important, and saying, come along, come with me, be part of it. Manageable is almost pretty much directly the opposite. It's around saying, this is going to be great, and it's going to be so easy for you. This is not going to make your life any harder. It's going to make it feel really slick and smooth. Come on board, because it's actually going to make your life easier, not harder than it already is. So something that you might use manageable framing for is when perhaps there's a change to a process in an organization, or a change to a job role, or something which may bring a sense of threat, or we're going to have to do more work here. Is finding out how you can make it as manageable. Now, what I'm not saying is say it's going to be manageable when it's not, when you know it's going to be really hard, because actually that's not helping anyone. But it's really about sharing how easy something could be when they come on board, because quite often when we view a change or something new happens, we see it as something insurmountable, or something that is going to be really difficult for us, or that will probably bring us more work, when that's not always the facts, and that's not always the case. So it's really identifying what will be easy within that process and tapping into that as much as possible. It's also around breaking things down as well, as it says at the bottom there, into manageable chunks. And then the last frame is communicating in a mysterious fashion. And this says there, come and be curious. It's like the secret formula to, or 3 amazing ways to be a better leader. That uses a sort of a mysterious, there's a secret there that I want to involve you in. And it's something that you really should be involved with, because it's going to revolutionize things for you. As I said, it's not one that I've particularly had cause to use, but again, it features quite a lot in how online publishers use mysterious framing quite a lot, get involved in this, because it's going to teach you something that's a big mystery to everyone else that will help your life significantly. It's about piquing curiosity, getting people to think that there's something in there that they will be able to learn from and will be interesting to them. So those are the 3 frames that Zoe Chance talks about in the book. And thinking about your influencing conversation that you identified on one of the previous slides, I'd just like you to think about which one of those might seem the most useful to you, and what might that look like. So if your influencing conversation again is around maybe a possible promotion, is it going to be better for you to sell it as a big idea to your line manager? Look at how, look at how I could make a big difference within this team, and look at how well I could speak to the values and the purpose of the team by being more involved. Or is it the manageable? if you allow me this opportunity, it's going to be so easy for you. I'm going to make your life so much easier. Or maybe there's some mysterious frame that you could put around that particular opportunity. Perhaps there's some sort of secret that you could share with the people that you work with. The proof of the learning is always in the putting it into practice. So for you to really take away and think about a situation, maybe it's the same one or maybe it's a different one, and how many of the 7 principles you could possibly lean into to help you to have that conversation. Think about what the win-win scenario could look like. What might you need to give up on and compromise, and what you were looking for from them? How is it going to benefit everyone involved? And which frame might you use? Okay, so that's all the content I've got for you. Hopefully that was useful.